Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. Hey there folks, we're still on hiatus, but as promised, I'm back with some newish content. We're going to change it up a bit this week. Tonight's show is a collection of Bigfoot or Sasquatch submissions. Stories that were previously played on a past episode, ranging from Season 13 all the way up to Season 16. But before we break the seal on those entries, a quick reminder to call the show with your own true spooky encounters. That phone number is 888-608-NIGHT. That's 888-608-NIGHT. Or record your story as a voice memo on your phone and email me at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget, I still need those government worker calls for the government worker special here in a couple weeks. If you're calling those stories in, don't forget to use the word government worker in the first couple sentences. And also don't forget that you can grab some merchandise over at our shop at monstersamonguspodcast.com/shop. And lastly, don't forget that Shadows in the Desert, High Strangeness in the Brago Triangle has finally been released. Apple TV, Amazon Prime, or BragoTriangle.com to learn more. Now, to get this upright, huge, and hairy episode going. Beginning with this entry that originally aired on Season 15, Episode 8. Welcome back to the program, Vince.
Hey Derek, this is Vince from Illinois. Called in a couple times before. Just wanted to report a sighting just now. Don't know what the heck it was, but freaked me out. So my 9 to 5 is driving a tractor trailer overnight. Kind of go a little bit out of the way, sometimes over to Michigan, sometimes to Indiana. But anyway, I'm headed to East Moline to one of our hub locations to drop off some trailers and pick some up and head back home. Well, I'm on my way back home right now, and, nature calls. And if you're familiar at all with Chicago to East Moline, it's a straight shot down 88. There's a handful, 2, maybe 3 stop-offs where there's, like, a gas station and, maybe grab some food or something like that. Like, other than that, there's nothing. It's pitch black, no light, and nobody is traveling between Iowa and Illinois at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, stopped off, nature calls, had to use the bathroom to relieve myself, so had no other options. Pulled off on the side of the road, threw on my little headlamp that I use, so then, as I'm walking around the side of the truck, walking across the grass, stare off the shoulder, I'm not stepping into any weird drop-offs or anything like that. So I take care of business. I turn around to start walking back towards my truck when the headlamp catches a couple, little glistens, little glints of light. And I'm like, okay, what was that? So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's just a business far off in the distance. No. I turn back, and they're super low to the ground. I'm like, okay, a raccoon, a possum, a deer, coyote, whatever. They're going to leave me alone. It's fine. All of a sudden, they start to rise higher than they were. Like, almost as if, if it was a deer, it could have just been, it was eating, grazing on some grass, and it lifted its head. But it just kept going higher and higher and higher then I realized that I'm staring at something standing now on two legs. Freaked me out. Started moving towards me. It looked like it had pretty long arms. Couldn't really discern any specific colors or any markings on it. Kind of looked like the head just kind of shifted into the shoulders. There was no distinction between a neck and the head and the shoulders. And yeah, it started moving towards me, and I nearly peed myself right then and there, even though my bladder was empty. It scared the living crap out of me. And I ran around to the side of my truck, jumped in, and I have never hit that gas pedal so hard in my life. So yeah, I don't know what it was, but I don't know if anybody else has seen anything like that. Again, this is headed technically back from East Moline towards Chicago along 88. Yeah, thanks for the podcast. Great work. Really appreciate it. All right, take care. Have a good one, and hopefully someone can help me out with this.
Thank you, Vince. Now, I assume we're talking about Bigfoot here, right? I mean, a tall bipedal creature. No neck. It sort of fits the description. Now that's what I call a live call, where a witness had literally just seen whatever it is they're reporting. And I believe that's the first and only time we've ever featured a Bigfoot call as a live call. I like that. And it's also one of the few times that I will happily accept a call from a moving vehicle. Seems appropriate. Now, it's sort of strange that this activity took place in the state of Illinois, because it's not a state I typically would associate with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it. But during Vince's call, I did a little Googling. I wanted to see which states ranked where in regards to Bigfoot sightings. The top 10, starting at 10, Missouri, Michigan, Texas, Oregon, then Illinois, Ohio, Florida, California, and Washington. Now, I've linked to the website that I'm getting all this information off of, and the source is the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. Now, Delaney went above and beyond this evening, and she actually looked up the counties that Vince drove through over on the BFRO website. Now, I've linked to each of those pages over there at the show notes, so go take a look if you're interested. And a big thanks, Vince, for sharing that amazing story. Now, who's ready for a BHM? A big, hairy monster. Karissa from the PNW. Welcome to the program.
Hey Derek, my name is Karissa. I'm calling from the Pacific Northwest. I am calling about something that happened to me or that I witnessed actually right around the time when I started listening to your podcast. So immediately when it happened, I thought about calling in, but it's taken me a few years to work up the nerve. Anyways, my husband and I are avid campers. We were camping out on the Olympic Peninsula in Olympic National Park, and we sleep in a roof tent on top of my car when we're in designated campgrounds. So in the middle of the night, I woke up and I thought I was waking up in a dream or that I was still dreaming, and I was hearing really lovely owl noises, like owl as in the bird, and thought I was hearing these owl noises and woke up actually smiling, which I'm a person who has nightmares, so that wasn't very typical for me to wake up like feeling happy. So I woke up in this dream, thought I was hearing owls, and then realized, not in a scary way, but just realized that the sound I was hearing was more of like a whooping type sound. And then if I was laying horizontally, like in the tent on the roof, I could hear one whoop happening like right in front of me, and then I heard one right behind me, and then I heard a third one over to my right side, and that was kind of the one where I was like, oh, this is not a dream or an owl. This is definitely some sort of animal, and I heard all three, and it was kind of triangulated, and that's kind of it. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything else. They just carried on for a couple minutes, and I tried to wake my partner up, but he didn't catch it. My dog, who was in the car, didn't catch it or freak out. Definitely one of those things where I was like, is this something that I made up in my head? But I haven't been able to stop thinking about it for years at this point. So I think it really happened. I think where I am, this would be the place, I guess. Anyways, love the podcast. Thank you.
As an avid camper, I can easily put myself in your shoes, Karissa. And what an eerily exciting concept. Now, I'm sure a million thoughts went through your head, but none so prevalent as, is this an owl? And if it's not an owl, what the hell is it? And we all know what owls sound like. But not all of us know what an alleged Bigfoot sounds like. But thanks to Ron Moorhead and Al Berry and their 1970s era recordings, we just might have an idea. Here are vocalizations categorized as whoops, recorded in the infamous Sierra Sounds, allegedly made by an upright hairy creature. Now, just for clarification, the second voice you hear in this clip is the men mimicking the strange sounds. Now, imagine you're in your tent at night. Maybe you're all bundled up in your sleeping bag. The campfire slowly dying outside, and you hear a slight sound. Perhaps a twig snap. Then the crickets stop. Then comes the sound on all sides of the tent. Now that's my kind of outing. Big thanks, Karissa, for sharing the story. I always enjoy a big, hairy monster tale.
This was very deliver that.
Eating better and keeping my portion size in check is so much easier with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Lately, my schedule has been very hectic, and when I get busy, I tend to eat out a lot or not eat at all, which is expensive and unhealthy. But with Factor, every meal is fresh, chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Their meals are restaurant quality, but require no prep, and there's no mess to clean up after. And they have 35 different options to choose from each week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. You can even add breakfast, smoothies, snacks, and more to make sure you have options for the whole day. We usually eat Factor meals for lunch, and it really saves us time and the stress of figuring out what to make. Not to mention cooking and cleaning up in the middle of the day. Plus, it's less expensive than reaching for that takeout menu. We've tried everything from Indian butter chicken to turkey chili with cornbread, and every meal has been absolutely delicious. The meals come right to your door on a delivery day you choose, and you get as much or as little as you need by choosing your meals each week. Plus, you can pause or reschedule deliveries at any time. Head to factormeals.com/MAU50 and use code MAU50 to get 50% off. That's code MAU50 at factormeals.com/MAU50 to get 50% off. Now, as always, supporting our sponsor supports the show. So thank you for listening. Now, back to that peculiar shape standing in the tree line. Now, this next entry comes to us from near my boyhood home. Just a couple hours to be exact. And after hearing what Tess experienced, maybe I should be worried about going back. Please welcome Tess from the state of Pennsylvania.
Hello, everyone. This is Tess calling from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania again. I just subscribed to Patreon, and I've been binge listening for a couple days now, so I just wanted to share this with you guys. When was this? This was probably like 2-3 years ago. I decided that I wanted to go take a walk in the woods by my father's house. So I took a couple books, I took my binder, and I was definitely smoking the devil's lettuce. So I took some of that as well. Whenever I'm in the woods by myself, I try to make jokes just because I do get a little jumpy if no one else is there with me. So I remember sitting there at the homemade fire pit all the teenagers would go to at night, and I'm reading my book and I'm smoking, and me going off on a tantrum, I just said out loud, like, hey, if there's a Bigfoot in these woods, just know that I'm a friend. I believe in you. I don't have any beef jerky, but like I'll give you a hug. And I kept repeating this because I didn't have any beef jerky. I do believe in Bigfoot, and I was just trying to be a little silly. So then after I'm done like messing around and saying all this stuff, I go back to reading my book. Not even 5 minutes later, I heard 3 tree knocks. Now, by all means, I do not believe there's a Bigfoot living in the woods by my dad's house. The woods are just way too small for such a huge creature. Like, we have deer and fox and coyotes, but like no bears. That doesn't mean that I did not get scared. I packed my bags as fast as possible, dumped out the water, and I just booked it out of the woods. I didn't think it was a Bigfoot, but the thought of someone listening to my conversation and being that close to me to mess with me scared me more than a Bigfoot would. I hope you guys enjoy that fun little story, because I look back to it and I still laugh my ass off, even though how scared I got. Alrighty. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, Tess, for sharing the entry. You know, it's easy to assume Tess might have been a little paranoid as a byproduct of her recreational activity. And that may have been the case. But given her location, I'm not entirely sure she should rule out the big guy.
Anyone looking to find Sasquatch may want to start in western Pennsylvania. An online organization tracking the numbers found 95 sightings in Westmoreland County, according to the Patriot News website. A separate study conducted for the Travel Channel's In Search of Monsters looked at data from the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. They found 23,000 sightings reported since the 1950s. The largest number of them happened in Washington, followed by California and Pennsylvania.
That one comes on behalf of CBS Local News. And, like Utah, that part of Pennsylvania has really exploded in past decades with reports of paranormal activity. Small-town monsters film Invasion on Chestnut Ridge covers some of the wild activity reported, including a UFO crash and subsequent government cover-up. So make of all that what you will. Dig into it if you're interested. And thanks again, Tess, for calling in. Now this next one comes to us from a familiar voice. Please welcome Joe from the road back to the program.
Hey Derek, this is Joe, the truck driver. I've called in before about the skinwalkers and such out there on old US 666 in New Mexico. I was listening to your season 12, episode 16, and about Javier and his suspected Bigfoot encounter he had. And it reminded me when we lived up there in Farmington, we were coming back. It was, I remember correctly, it was about 1981. It was, I think in November, if I remember correct, we were coming back from Texas, spending Thanksgiving with some family, and we had a lot of my relatives with us from my mom's side of the family that was from out there in New Mexico. And we were between Cuba, New Mexico, and San Ysidro, New Mexico on US 550, where it's kind of mountainy and hilly and foresty. And we had to stop because everybody was tired and such. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when we pulled over, and we had 2 pickups with campers on them, and everybody was getting into beds and everything, just going to hunker down for the night. And at about 3:30 in the morning, I was in the front pickup. It was my dad's work truck, And one of my cousins come running up and was banging on the window, on the passenger window, it just scared us. But he was even more scared. His eyes were huge and everything. He goes, there's something on the hill, we got to go. And I remember turning and looking and just seeing a silhouette of something tall and shaggy, and it had that, people say it's a rotteny smell, but to me it was like a matted dog smell, I guess you could say. The wind was coming from the east, it wasn't a strong wind, but a breeze. And there was at least, but it was my dad, my mom, me, my brother, my sister, my aunt, 4 cousins. We all saw this. So we got up, fired up the pickups, and we took off. Well, we made it up to Farmington. We all went to bed. The next day, Dad had to get back to work, and he was working in an oil field up there. So I went with him because every chance I could, because that was me getting my dirt bike. But I wanted to go, but at the same time, I didn't want to go because it's pretty freaky what happened. And I know there's pictures of the footprints that they found, and they were a good 16 to 18 inches long and at least about 6-8 inches wide. There were some spots that they saw like hair hanging in the trees where he would have ran back here. I'm just using he, could have been a female. I don't know. And could have ran back in the bush and everything when we started up. And what woke up my cousins and my mom and my aunts and my sister was something was hitting the side of the camper on the pickup, like pelting it, like somebody was throwing rocks at it. And that's what they woke up to and seeing that silhouette up there. And they did remember hearing some whistling, but they thought nothing of it because, they were tired. They thought they were imagining stuff, and they just went back to sleep after that. But that's about all I can remember. I don't really remember who's got the pictures anymore. I think my cousin Charlene does, or my Aunt Mattie does, but I remember there's pictures taken of the footprints in the snow and the hair that they found hanging in the branches. I don't know if they've ever did anything with it, ever reported it or what. I was just 10 years old at the time, so that's about all that I can remember. Being that young, I did not want to go back and go really chase these down. It was a partly cloudy night. It wasn't a full moon, probably about 3/4 moon. There was enough light you could see, pretty decent. And the way the highway was at that point, the side of the hill that they cut through, it's a steep embankment going up to the top of what's the original hill, and that's where he was standing at. That's where everybody was going up. And I don't know. I totally blocked that out until I heard Javier's story about that when he was living up there in the Albuquerque area, and it kind of kicked that back into my memory. So I thought I'd call and let you know. So still remember it pretty good. So for it being 40 years ago, So, all right. Enjoy the show. Keep up the great work. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to hear you're still bouncing around out there. Now, there are states in this country that most novel Bigfoot enthusiasts immediately associate with the big fella. California, Oregon, Washington, Florida, Ohio, etc. Then there are those states that you really don't hear that much from, Squatch-wise. Nevada, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and yes, even New Mexico. And at first glance, many of these places seem completely void of any monster activity. But when you really begin to dig in, you start to realize that these often neglected states harbor small pockets of activity, hidden in high, rugged country, far from civilization's peeping eye. And the state in which Joe had his encounter is certainly no different. You don't typically hear of many Sasquatch sightings from the land of enchantment. I think folks around those parts are too busy watching the skies rather than the tree line. But like I said, there are pockets, small greenbelt type areas that still cling to the legend of creatures in the creek beds and monsters on the mountains. And in New Mexico, their secret little pocket isn't all that far from where Joe's family had their experience. 100 miles at best. 100 miles to a pine-covered mountain town, nestled 8,700 feet in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. A little place called Red River. And around there, his existence isn't such a secret.
In Red River, people are murmuring about something big.
Possible Sasquatch here in town.
Bigfoot, that is.
There's also a gentleman that came up to me in 2014 with some footprints that he found behind his cabin that he recently purchased. And those footprints didn't make any sense to him, maybe 18 inches by 7 or 8 inches wide.
And that's not the only sighting that's been reported. Dozens over the years.
People have heard tree knocking up here, the whoops. Large footprints have been found. There's been smells that are associated with Bigfoot activity.
Finding Bigfoot is no small feat.
Just because you don't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Seeing's believing. Maybe you need to come up to Red River, get in the woods, see if you can see any evidence of the Sasquatch activity.
Now that clip from KOB News 4 out of New Mexico. So they say the creature is out there, in those pockets. And if you don't believe me, just ask Joe. Thank you again, Joe, for calling in. And stay safe out there. Oh, Joe, and please, see if you can't get a hold of those photographs. We would certainly love to see them. Now, unless you want to walk around looking like a Sasquatch, you need a good razor that you can rely on. Now, I know from experience there's nothing worse than a cheap razor that leaves your skin nicked and irritated. If that struggle sounds familiar, it's time for you to upgrade to Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover. And now they're bringing precise engineering to your shaving experience. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. And once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. Now it gets even better. The razor has a built-in channel to evacuate hair in shaving cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. And the overall shaving experience speaks for itself. I can clean up my edges, feel, and look more put together, and not worry about wobble, nicks, and skin irritation. It's time to say no to subscriptions, and yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/MAU to pick the razor for you. Use code MAU and you'll get 2 years worth of blades for free with your razor. Just be sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/MAU and use code MAU. As always, supporting our sponsors supports the show, so thank you for listening. Now back to that candlestick floating down your hallway. Now then, what's a Halloween episode without a monster? A big, hairy, red-eyed monster. Patrick from Kansas. Tell us what you saw.
Hi, Derek. This is Patrick in the state of Kansas. Love your show. Been listening for like a year now. Probably heard every single episode. Finally worked up the nerve to call. Had a few experiences in my life way back in the day. Nothing in my recent life, but maybe we're just more attuned to that wavelength or spectrum of reality when we're younger. Anyway, this probably happened in the year 2006, maybe 2007. I was 18 or 19 at the time. This was the summertime in Kansas. My friend and I, we used to entertain ourselves by taking super long cruises through the country. in the evening and into the night sometimes, and just exploring the back roads of our state, our county, and whatever. And this particular night, we drove, I don't know, we were driving forever. We were driving around Lake City down in Barber County, Kansas. It's basically a ghost town. If anyone's listening from Lake City, I apologize. I know that there are people who actually live there, but it's like probably 5 people. Yeah, just nothing there, nothing out there. So we're driving around there on a back road, just talking, chatting it up. This is maybe like 1:30 in the morning or something like that. It's pretty late. It was on a weekend. My friend and I were driving down this road, just talking, like I said, and I'm looking out the window, looking at the stars or whatever, because that's about all you can see out there. And thing just stands up on the side of the road. We couldn't see what it was. It just stood straight up. Seemed to be about the size of a deer. I saw it. My friend saw it at the same time, so he kind of pumped the brakes. The deer are a pretty common sight anywhere, and in Kansas also. So we thought nothing of it at first, but we stopped so we didn't hit the deer. And next thing we know, this thing leaps completely across the road. Like, it doesn't run across the road like a deer. Also, a deer wouldn't run across the road. It would run away from us. Yeah, it ran across the road basically on 2 legs. It was maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, bipedal. It moved very fast. We couldn't really see much detail, except for when we saw it initially, when it stood up, the headlights must have caught its eyes. Its eyes were bright red when they caught the headlights. Seemed to be covered in dark hair, maybe had dark skin. Couldn't get any detail, so that was pretty strange. Ran across the road, ran to the other side of the road, into the field, into the darkness where we couldn't see it anymore. My friend and I were just sitting there staring at each other like, what the hell was that? My friend, I think, suggested, oh my God, was that a chupacabra? I thought it was hilarious. I said, maybe it was like a little Bigfoot. I don't know. Couldn't see any details. So we kept driving away from there, and it's 1:30 in the morning in Barber County, Kansas, which is close to the Oklahoma border, and there's like the most populous town in that county is maybe 2,000 people, and it was nowhere near where we were. We're about 30 miles away from it. And as we're driving down the road, this big white pickup truck, like a new model pickup truck, comes screaming towards us in the direction of whatever the hell it was we'd just seen. You know, we don't think anything of this at first because even though it's late, people in Kansas drive trucks, especially out in the country. You know, if it had been a farmer or something, you know, who knows. So anyways, this truck is driving towards us, and it passes us. And we just kind of made a mental note. It was a newer model truck, white, large. It was going really fast. I mean, we were peeling out of there probably around 50 miles per hour. About as quick as you want to go on a dirt road. They had to have been going about 80, maybe 90. They were hauling ass towards that thing we'd just seen, which, you know, we thought nothing of at that moment. Anyways, we passed that truck, and we're still driving, wondering what the hell it was we'd just seen. And then we see this other truck coming up towards us. We didn't know it was a truck at the time. We just saw headlights, you know, because they were off in the distance. And they closed with us really fast because they were hauling too. And as we passed, we saw that truck was the exact same make, model, year as the truck that we just passed, which is not common at all to see that much traffic on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere at 1:30-ish in the morning in the middle of Kansas, let alone 2 trucks that are the exact same make and model. It's pretty strange. By this point, we're like, what is going on? You know, so we keep driving. If you've ever driven back roads of the Midwest, you're from Ohio, so you probably, I don't know, it might be a little more hilly, windy there, but yeah, roads just go in straight lines here in Kansas, so we are driving straight. And we see another set of headlights, and this one is hauling ass too. Just gains on us in no time. They were going like 80 as well, past them. This was a large, white, new model van. We got no look at any of the plates or anything, but it was just, yeah, pretty weird that we saw something that ran on 2 legs, about the size of a small person, in the middle of Kansas, in the middle of nowhere, and heading in its direction with great speed were 3 new model white vehicles of unknown origin. I don't know what that was. Pretty strange. Our minds went to conspiracies, aliens. I have no idea. But that was pretty weird. Anyways, again, love your podcast, man. You take care. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, that is certainly a monster. A hairy humanoid thing, upright with 2 long, dark hair-covered legs that seemed to leap across the road. Now that sounds like a Squatch to me. Or at least it could be. So I started digging. After all, Kansas isn't exactly the place you think of when it comes to Sasquatch. Sure, they have the Sally House, Stall Cemetery, and Gateway to Hell. And old Sinkhole Sam, their very own lake monster. But in a few remote parts of the state, they also seem to have Bigfoot reports. And just 40-some miles to the northeast of where Patrick saw what he saw, other reports have come in. These courtesy of the BFRO website. Kingman, Kansas. One Saturday evening, at about 6:30 p.m. in October, a friend and I were walking along the Neneska River and saw 8 to 10 very large footprints in the sand. The prints were 11 to 14 inches long and about 6 inches wide in the largest spot. Right away I knew that the tracks were not human. They had to belong to Bigfoot. The prints had 5 toe marks at the end. They were about half a mile from the Rocky Dam under a bridge. The tracks led to the water and could not be followed. And then this one, from the Murdoch area. Back in 2004, my boyfriend and I were driving around at night. We were near Murdoch, Kansas on a dirt road when we seen something run along the fence line. It was grayish-white and about 8 foot tall. I turned the car around to see if it was still there, and it was gone. I have always joked that it was Bigfoot, never knowing that there had been sightings in Kansas. Now, I thought that last one was eerily similar to Patrick's encounter, save for the color of the creature. Something worth noting. And I should also note that the BFRO website wasn't the only place that I was able to find first-hand encounters. The following story was told on the television program Finding Bigfoot, when the gang trekked to Kansas to investigate reports in the same general area that Patrick referred to in his story. This clip is from Season 5, Episode 9.
Well, James, now that we're here, will you tell us exactly what happened that night?
Well, it was about 12 midnight. I had my chair set up, and just sitting here relaxing, just watching my pool, and look up, and I seen this big shape with 2 glowing eyes. There's no bears in Kansas, and there's no mountain lion with a head that damn big. So I told him that I was leaving him a fish, and I took everything except for my chair, which I forgot, and I left. I came back the next day to grab my chair, and there was 2 footprints in the water and a couple out here on the dirt, and there was a handprint going into the mud to grab the fish.
I find James's story very interesting. He claims that he was so terrified that he left his chair, his fishing pole, all of his gear, and ran for the hills. Yet he stopped and had the presence of mind to offer his catfish to this massive figure that he thinks is coming after him. That just doesn't add up.
Well, I had the fish like right here, and it went down like that and went like that.
So you saw finger scrapes like what you just did?
Yeah. I just wish I would have got the pictures.
Yeah, so do I.
Now again, I couldn't help but notice a few similarities between this Finding Bigfoot story and Patrick's tale. Similar looking creature. Both stood up from a crouching position when noticed, and both talked about red, glowing eyes. Now I realize in the Finding Bigfoot clip he does not mention that the eyes were red, but in another part of the broadcast he does include that detail. We're dedicated to getting the story right here at MAU. Anyway, the only attribute that appears the two sightings do not have is the creature's size. One was described as 4 or 5 feet, the other 8 or 9. And that's a pretty big difference, which could either indicate a misidentification, or perhaps that there are more than one of these things, and they may be at different ages. Now, what's missing from all of this research is the caravan of covert government vehicles racing across the grassland. I did some serious digging and could not find a connection with Kansas, South Central Kansas to be more specific, and any sort of government cover-up involving Bigfoot or any other cryptid for that matter. But maybe someone out there knows more than me. Maybe a local in the area has heard rumors, seen a thing or two. If so, be sure to give us a call, shoot us an email. Until then, just know, Patrick, that it may seem wild to see something like that, especially in a place like Kansas. But if my research tells us anything, you're not the only one.
Just like
So I heard something mind-blowing. Did you know when you search for something on Netflix, what you get is only a fraction of what Netflix actually has? Netflix has more than 18,000 titles globally, but only about 6,000 of those are available in the US. You're missing out on thousands of great shows, unless you use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is an app that lets you change your online location so you can control where you want online streaming services to think you're located. They have over 100 different locations, so you can access thousands of new shows no matter where you live. And it doesn't stop at just Netflix. It works on many other streaming services too. Now, in the early 2000s, I really loved British television, and one of my favorites was Peep Show. Now, if you haven't seen it, it's not what you think. Anyway, it's not available here on any ad-free streaming services. But with ExpressVPN, I can access the UK's Netflix and watch every hilarious episode. And I can also watch one of my all-time favorites, The Office, over on the Canadian Netflix. All I did was open Netflix from an incognito tab on my computer, make sure cookies are turned off, sign into Netflix, open ExpressVPN, select the UK, hit connect, then click into my profile on Netflix. Not only is it super easy and fast, but I can also use ExpressVPN across all of my devices. And as a bonus, ExpressVPN also protects your privacy and security to keep you safe from hackers. So stop missing out on great television and get thousands of new shows with ExpressVPN. We got them to give Monsters Among Us listeners 3 extra months for free when you use our special link, expressvpn.com/MAU. That's expressvpn.com/MAU to get 3 extra months free.
Hey, listen, on top.
And like many of our best stories do, this one comes to us anonymously from parts unknown.
Hey, Derek. I'm going to remain anonymous. I wanted to submit a story for your upcoming transportation episode. Don't know if this fits, but I am a helicopter pilot by trade, and I have been for almost 20 years now. And in 2015, I was working for a utility company. At that time, we were constructing high voltage lines and high voltage towers in rural areas, and we were in northern Utah. It was an early morning flight. It was myself and a spotter. We were going up to survey a new section of construction, and the area that we were flying out of was about 30 minutes flight time from the airport. Like I said, this was a morning flight. Sun was up, but wasn't super bright outside. And normally I stay about 2,000 feet above ground level, or AGL, when I'm flying. But this particular morning, we were having a good time. I was enjoying flying. So we were kind of buzzing the treetops, which isn't necessarily safe, but we were just enjoying ourselves. And my spotter, I was paying attention to what I was doing flying. We were coming around a mesa, and as we rounded to the left around this mesa, there was a clearing in the cypress or pine trees. And my spotter grabbed me and said, turn around, really fast. He was super excited. Didn't think much of it, so I pulled up and kind of nosed it around to the left and kind of dove back in towards this clearing. And as I come to a hover on the outside of the clearing, and I was like looking around trying to figure out what he was looking at, because I thought maybe he had saw some kind of wildlife. This guy's an avid hunter, and that's pretty much all he ever talked about was hunting and outdoorsy kind of stuff. And about that time, he points, and there it is. And the angle that I was looking at, I couldn't see what he was pointing at due to the instrument panel of the aircraft. The aircraft we were flying in was an MD-530, and the instrument panel shoots kind of right up in the middle of the bubble-style cockpit. So I was sitting on the left side of the aircraft. He was on the right, and where he was pointing, the instrument panel blocked my view. So I gave it a little left pedal and was able to look around to see what he was looking at. And as I'm sitting there at a hover, can't believe that I'm looking at a 10-foot at minimum. The only thing I can describe it as is a Sasquatch. At least 10 feet, because I was only about 50 feet off the top of the trees. The trees were maybe 25 feet tall at most. But standing on the edge of this clearing was a Sasquatch. About 10 feet tall, at least 10 feet tall. Kind of auburn brown hair. He almost blended in with the background pretty well. And as we're sitting there watching him, and this entire encounter maybe lasted a minute. And I say that this was a male, that's because that's the vibe that this thing was giving off, was that it was a male, just by his statute and how he was not backing down from, us hovering above these trees. And then my spotter starts yelling through his mic that there's another one, and he points, and sure enough, there's a significantly smaller one, probably about 8 feet, 8 feet, and she has what looks like a young one on her back. You could barely make it out from where we were at. She moves around behind him, and then I noticed that there was a much smaller one, probably about 4 feet tall, maybe 5 feet tall, standing beside her. And her, and like I said, this one, I'm not sure if it was a female, but that's the vibe it was giving off. She moved behind him and took a few steps, and they disappeared into the trees. And he stood there and stood his ground, and then took a few steps backwards, maintaining eye contact with us. And he turned to his right and 2 steps into the tree line, and he disappeared. Now, that's the first and only time I've ever seen anything like that in almost 20 years of flying. I flew with the military for several years, never seen anything. I'd heard stories from other pilots, but I've never saw anything up until that point. I'd never believed in Sasquatch, didn't believe in it, didn't disbelieve in it, just kind of was a neutral area. And as a helicopter pilot, I'm more of an intellectual, hands-on type thinker, and, I was need proof in order to believe. This was definitely a shocker. This was definitely a slap in my face, more or less, that, thousands of reports that are all over the world. Here I am looking at this thing. My spotter and I talked about it briefly throughout the day as we were doing our survey, and we refueled a couple times and went right back out doing our same thing. And each time we made a point to fly back over this clearing. But like I said, it was early morning, so the sun was up. So I'm assuming that these Sasquatch maybe had been in that clearing foraging for food, or waking up, or making their way to wherever they sleep. I'm not sure, because I've since done research and found out that most of the time these things seem to be a little bit more nocturnal than they are anything else. So I have to assume that maybe we just happened to stumble upon them foraging for food that morning, or maybe even headed there, making their way back to go to bed. I'm not sure. But the part of Utah we were in is very remote. Like I said, it was a 30-minute flight time from the airport just to get to where we were going. And the aircraft that I was piloting that day is an MD-530. It's got a cruising speed of just over a little over 100 knots. So 30-minute flight time. We were several miles from any kind of civilization. But anyway, love the podcast. Hope you can use this story. Keep up the great work, man. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, caller. That's one of them stories that makes you want to believe. Truly hair-raising. and a helicopter pilot. How come clean I did not have that on my transportation bingo card? But I probably should have. Helicopters play a pivotal role in the paranormal. There's no shortage of stories of mysterious black helicopters circling recent cattle mutilation sites. They've also been connected to UFO activity, following or sometimes escorting a mysterious floating craft. And we all know the reputation these flat black choppers have in regards to UFO crashes and landing zones. These thunderous mechanical birds have found their way into Sasquatch lore as well. There's a story out of Mount St. Helens in Washington. Rumor is, after its eruption in 1980, federal helicopters swooped in and retrieved the charred remains of Sasquatch in the area, hauling them out in nets hanging below the choppers. There's another video out of Tennessee shot back in 2008 from an airborne helicopter of some thing running across an open field. And some conspiracy theorists suggest that the government also retrieves Sasquatch that are shot and killed by civilians. It's said they swoop in and take them in the cloak of night, in, you guessed it, a black helicopter. And another Bigfoot helicopter connection that I can't rattle from my skull is a video that was captured back in 2011. And it can be found over YouTube or in tonight's show notes. But it's titled Bigfoot Hunted by Helicopter. And it seems to depict just that. Now, I'm not sure where the video was filmed. If I had to guess, somewhere here in the West. But the sequence of events captured make it relevant regardless of the location. The video was originally posted by YouTube user Mega Frightful and shows a family target shooting in a vast, partially snowy valley with man-sized shrubs in the distance and grasses in the foreground. The young man shooting takes a few cracks with a .22 rifle before switching over to a shotgun, as you're about to hear. All the while, you can hear a helicopter circling low overhead, obviously flying in a pattern that would suggest they are searching for something. As the young man fires the shotgun, the considerably louder percussion spooks something large in the distant hillside. Something dark, humanoid, and on two legs. It appears as though the family never saw the figure scurry across the frame until it was played back. And the helicopter that was circling suddenly comes very near the family, and the strange figure, just moments after it started moving from its hiding spot on the hillside. It sounds as though the chopper is suddenly right overhead before the video finally cuts out. Now, normally I don't see the point in playing audio from a witness's video, but I think this one's very auditory. So I think this is gonna work. Now, before I push play on this truncated version, just imagine, if you will, a massive man-shaped creature suddenly pop up and run out of frame as soon as you hear the shotgun blast. Here is that clip.
Okay. Targets. Okay. Oh, nice. Close. Try. You got it. You gonna try the shotgun? Whoa. Whoa, that was a big kick. You okay, Brock? You okay? Let's see, did you get anything? Ooh.
Whatever was going on, that helicopter was certainly interested in something over there all of a sudden. Now, as always, I've linked to this video and most everything else discussed in tonight's episode in the show notes, I know. So go take a look. This video doesn't seem to be as popular as some of the other Bigfoot videos found across the web, but after stumbling upon it a decade or so ago, I can't stop thinking about it. And I won't stop thinking about our caller's story either.
This is okay.
Now, out of the state of Connecticut, Shawn, welcome to the program.
Hey, brother. Absolutely love your show. My name's Shawn. I live in Connecticut, Meriden to be exact. I'm a big fisherman. Like to go out, not a big hunter, big fisherman. But I know to get the big ones, I started hitting the reservoirs, the illegal reservoirs. There's a couple near around where I live. A couple towns away from me, there's a reservoir called Broad Brook. It's in between the towns of Cheshire and Wallingford, Connecticut. Vast woods, thick woods. You barely can walk through them. There's two parts between two towns that have roads that separate the reservoirs. There's 4 reservoirs altogether. You could Google it if you'd like. Anyways, I had my wife drop me off about 5:30 a.m., give or take. Told her to pick me up around 7. Not to push my luck getting caught. So I walked into the water, about up to my knees, and I noticed how quiet, everything was quiet, no noise, and the water would seem darker than usual. I couldn't even see my kneecaps. I mean, it was dark. It was really dark. No noise, no birds, no bugs, no ducks. So I took a couple casts, and that's when I heard it. It was a little growl coming from the other side of this part of the res. It was like a, and didn't pay no mind to it. Absolutely didn't pay no mind to it. So I cast a couple more times, reeled in my line. And I hear like a cracking in the woods, like a low, and then by the end of it sounded almost like a lightning strike. I see a tree fall from the other side of the res. And it had to be close to the water because when it fell, the big top of the tree hit the water. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God. When that tree went down, this was pushed over. This thing was pushed over. When it went, then if you could ever imagine a lightning bolt coming down and hitting a tree, how loud it was, and then it cracks and falls. That's how loud it was. And then you hear the grunt afterwards. It was insane. It was scary. I mean, and I'm not scared of much. I mean, my dad showed me this place. He did 2 tours in Vietnam, and I mean, this place is sacred to fishermen. This place has dinosaur fish. I mean, we pull out 8, 9, 10-pound bass, pickerel the size of alligators. This place is so beautiful. And it's not only that, I brought my stepson in there so many times, and he always tells me he feels like we're being followed. And there were so many times, I got so many stories about this place because I've been fishing there for years. When you're walking, and then you start hearing somebody just above the ridge walking beside you, and then like you'll figure it out, and you'll start walking and stop real quick, and you'll still hear a couple footsteps go a step or 2 ahead of you. So I was scared. The hair on the back of my neck stood up like wire. I was like, oh my God. I called my wife right back. I said, come back and pick me up. She had just dropped me off 20 minutes before. I said, babe, I'm almost home. I'm like, please come back and pick me up. And as I'm sitting there, I hear another noise. I can't explain it. It was like a guttural growl, like that. And oh man, I'll tell you what, I was my pants. I was scared. So I moseyed out of the res. Now to be down in this res, I'm hiding in the water. I mean, there's a game warden comes by here, a couple times during the morning, and it was barely light. It just started getting light. It's just crazy. And I got many a friend who have told me that when they sneak into this reservoir, 2 in particular said they saw something. Now, I'm a believer in Bigfoot, and I got to admit, from what I've been hearing, I'm a believer in the dog man now. I would think, if anything, if you Google map it, you'll see the sizes of these reservoirs and see the sizes of these woods. The only people allowed to be in there is a rod and gun club. They've got access to the land. I'm not sure if they fish, but I know they got hunting rights there. But I'll tell you what, that was one of the scariest times of my life. I mean, everything about it was odd. Just the vibe was so odd. I was dumbfounded. I was scared. I was straight up scared. I ended up talking about it to 2 buddies of mine who fished that reservoir too. And they told me they came across a different being in those woods. And they had no explanation either. And they said it kind of looked like a wolf. And that's what made me think of Dogman. But I firmly believe this was probably a Bigfoot. So that's what I had to say, brother. I know it's not totally exciting, but it scared the hell out of me. But awesome show. Be safe. Peace.
Thank you, sir. Now, for legal purposes, let me point out that Monsters Among Us does not condone any illegal behavior. So don't say I told you to hop any fences. But with all of that out of the way, it sounds like Shawn had a rough morning. And to break it all down, let's start with this. I can see why Shawn would say that this might have been Bigfoot. The vocalizations and the tree-pushing behavior is consistent with other alleged experiences found throughout this country. And although Connecticut doesn't seem like it, it does have a history of sightings such as these. And it also has its own infamous monster. In the August 27, 1895 edition of the Winstead Evening Citizen and the Winstead Herald, the following was reported. A wild man. He appears to Selectman Smith of Winstead and scares his bulldog. Selectman Riley W. Smith of Winstead was picking berries in Colebrook Saturday when his bulldog, which is noted for its pluck, ran with a whine to him and stationed itself between his legs. A second afterward, a large man, stark naked and covered with hair all over his body, ran out of the clump of bushes, and with fearful yells and cries, made for the woods, where he soon disappeared. Selectman Smith is a powerful, wiry man, and has a reputation of having lots of sand, and his bulldog is also noted for his pluck. But Riley admits that he was badly scared, and that his dog was fairly paralyzed with fear. Now, in additional interviews, Selectman Smith claimed that the creature was a wild, hairy man of the woods, and that he stood 6 feet tall, with long black hair on his head that hung down to his shoulders, and shorter black hair that covered the body completely. It was muscular and agile, and Smith considered the creature dangerous. And after that, citizens around Winstead began to see this crazed manimal. One farmer claimed it stole chickens. A few women in town claimed to see an escaped gorilla. And one man even claimed to have caught a photo of the beast. But upon developing the image, it morphed into that of a normal man with a nice head of hair. Now, when asked about his wild claim, the photographer suggested that the camera malfunctioned because of fear or some other nonsense. That's when this story hit the wire, and the creature was momentarily thrusted into infamy. But if this all sounds too good to be true, then I suppose you have a good BS meter. Because in this case, you'd be right. In reality, there had never been a wild man in Winstead. The original Wire report had sprung from the overly fertile imagination of Lou Stone, a young reporter for the Winstead Evening Citizen. From there, mass psychology had done the rest. Reportedly, Stone came up with the idea because he needed to make $150 quickly, and he figured that the big city papers would be unlikely to buy a story about actual events in Winstead. He subsequently became well known as a teller of tall tales, but the wild man was his first hoax, and it remained his most famous. Now, that tidbit came from the website hoaxes.org. So if not Bigfoot, what could possibly have caused the ruckus that Shawn reported? Well, given the location, Southern Connecticut, I have a couple suspects in mind. Presented to you via WABC, ABC News 7 out of New York City, and WFSB, Eyewitness News 3 out of Connecticut.
Resident came home to a bear inside her kitchen. Another, can you imagine? I know, and look at this bear outside the window here. Unreal. Another bear in Canton had to be euthanized after several breaking into several homes there. And with bear sightings on the rise across our state, Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Erin Edwards talked to the woman from Winstead after that encounter.
That woman tells us she's used to seeing bears around her yard in Winstead, but this was the first time she came home to find one inside her house.
New at noon, cell phone video capturing a rare sighting, a moose running across a parking lot in Connecticut. It happened outside a movie theater in Danbury last weekend. The animal is seen running next to parked cars as someone in their car films. Another video you see here shows the same or a similar moose roaming around that city. State environmental officials are asking drivers to be on the lookout after recent sightings across the state. How rare is this? Well, they estimate there are only about 100 moose in all of Connecticut. And just to put that into perspective, there's about 100,000 deer in the state.
Now, the point here being that Connecticut has some large known animals roaming around. And with things like that tromping around in the woods, it's certainly worth considering. But if we're going to play devil's advocate here, it's important to note that according to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Association, a group that keeps track of things like this, there have been 22 separate reports made in the Constitution state dating back from 1953 all the way to June of 2022, including this report from August of 1995. Tell me that at least part of this doesn't sound eerily familiar. There's a small pond located in the wildlife management area in Harwington. I have frequently visited this place throughout my youth and adulthood to fish, camp, hike, bike, and hunt. The pond is spring-fed and is located in a flood control area. In late summer, the water level in the pond would drop drastically and create a high concentration of fish. The best time to go fishing was at night when the temperatures were cooler. On this particular night, I decided to go moonlight topwater bassin alone. I parked my car at the entrance gate around 9 p.m. and proceeded on foot down the service road. The moonlight was intense and afforded me the luxury of saving my flashlight batteries for most of the trek. The trip from the road to the pond is approximately 3/4 of a mile and takes you through several fields which are cut in the summer. On the way, I startled some deer that were around a salt lick. They ran off in the opposite direction of the pond. I walked through the final field and over a stone wall into a path that leads directly to the spot on the pond where I wanted to fish. The area from the stone wall to the pond is wooded and required the use of a flashlight. I had been fishing for approximately an hour and having some luck. The moon was full and almost directly overhead. I was out in the wide open and I could see very well all around the shoreline. The wood line around the pond was spaced from the water at least 30 yards plus in all directions. The moonlight didn't penetrate into the woods, and so I could not see into them. I felt as though I were on center stage to anything that might be in the woods, watching me. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, a loud and deep sound emanated directly from the woodline where I had entered the area. My knees went weak, and I nearly fell off the rocks. I turned to face the area in a ducking position, trying to see what it was. The sound was again repeated after a short pause, and then nothing. I pointed my flashlight in the direction of the sound, but it was too far and too weak. Not even an eyeshine. The sounds were deep, came from something large, 200 plus pounds, and they echoed across the pond. They were definitely directed at me. Something was letting me know that it was there. I found it odd that prior to and after there were no sounds of walking in the woods. Whatever this was made a stealthy approach and exit, and I never heard anything again. I stayed and fished nervously for another hour and left the area scared, but without incident.
When the moon hangs high on the breast of the lake and the bite of the wind is like a slap in the face, a legend of horror lurks in the haze. It's Bigfoot, a giant of a creature creature, all covered with hair, as tall as a timber and strong as a bear. Y'all better not go walking out there with Bigfoot. Bigfoot's coming, gonna get you, gonna get you. Bigfoot's coming, so you better watch out. Lock your doors and bolt your windows. Bigfoot's on the prowl. Bigfoot's coming, gonna get you, gonna get you. Bigfoot's coming, so you better watch out. Lock your doors and bolt your windows. Bigfoot's on the prowl.
Now, if you're wondering, those two locations, Shawn's experience and the BFRO report, both took place less than 30 miles apart. And a link to this full report and the other 21 from the state can be located in tonight's show notes. It doesn't seem to matter where you are. Legends of an upright, hairy monster seem to persist, even in the most unlikely of places. So big thanks to you, Shawn, again, for the entry. And Shawn, please, stay out of trouble. Oh, and that Bigfoot song you just heard a few moments ago, that was sent in by a listener. It had somehow evaded my radar until now, despite it being absolutely amazing and being released back in 1976. That was Bro Smith with Bigfoot. The full link can be found, you got it, in the show notes. Well, folks, that does it for my collection of some of the spookiest Bigfoot entries of the past few seasons. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and remember to keep circling back. We'll keep this content flowing until we're back here at the end of April. Now, Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Copyright Red Crow Media. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Delaney Bowers. All media used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Please give us a like and follow at Facebook, Instagram, and over at YouTube if you can. And while you're at it, a rate and review goes a long way to help the show. And if you've watched my film, please do me a solid and leave me a review anywhere that you possibly can there as well. I think that really helps get the film more eyes. Now finally, tonight's score was provided by Armchair Ambiance, Co.AG Music, and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Thank you all so much for listening. There's no Beyond episode this week, but I'm working on something here soon. Until then, keep it spooky and have a good night.